Coming up in today's Neurocast.
I've been questioned whether or not I'm really dyslexic. I've been under-supported. I've been reprimanded. I've been forced to disclose or be fired.
Instantly, there's a barrier put in place for visually impaired, visually stressed, dyslexic people.
There's a certain amount of instinct, bad practice, negligent at worst, certainly discriminatory. People are setting the conditions in their own eyes.
Hello, I'm Simon Stapleton and I'm Chief Exec of Truthsayers. And I'm here this morning with two wonderful people. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Remi Ray, who's a freelance coach. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, Remi?
Yeah, so I am a high performance coach. I work predominantly with neurodivergent women. And it's really around, the work that I do is really around helping women to understand their strengths. A lot of the time, people who are neurodivergent have been told consistently about their weaknesses, and actually, in order to build up the confidence and for them to show up and do the work that they want to do, it really needs to come from a place of strength. So yeah, I'm a high performance coach and I predominantly work with women, but not exclusively. It's just how the cookies kind of crumbled.
Right. And neurodivergent and neurodiversity are actually, I think, fairly new terms to a lot of people in business. And would you be able to just help us understand actually what those terms mean?
So I actually try not to use them as regularly. I mean, they are buzzwords at the moment,
Yeah.
they're trending. But ultimately, for me, and the way that I describe the work that I do, it's just around how you operate in your differences. And that for me sits outside of what society says is the norm. And so I just ask people to move into and love or lean into their differences. So for me, neurodiversity is about doing things in a different way than, you know, what you may have been told previously that works against your natural flow in how you operate as a human, right? Or a person, right? So for me, it's around your differences and embracing those differences. Also, I'm dyslexic. I can't even spell neurodiversity on a good day, much less neurodivergent and all the others, you know? So it's not fair for me to label my clients who have already been labeled multiple times and now they have to figure out this new terminology because it's buzzing. Mm-hmm. So I just, you know, call it as I see it, which is a difference in this capacity, right? And we lean into that and figure out what that looks like for you and how you can show up and operate to your fullest potential.
I really like that definition around differences because it does remove the labels.
Yeah.
And it takes, it's an opportunity to take away some of the stigmas and the kind of them and us that it might actually infer. Because actually, at the end of the day, we're all different, aren't we? And we're all together in that, having differences. Yeah. I really like that. It's refreshing to hear it defined that way. So yeah, thank you. Now we're here really to talk about neurodiversity in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so I just want to get your view on what you think employers are actually doing in that space and what challenges they're facing and can they do more?
Absolutely. I think all of us could do more. All of us could be more considerate across the board, even me as a neurodiverse person, right? My lived experience from working in professional environments has been quite turbulent. I've been questioned whether or not I'm really dyslexic. I've been under-supported. I've been reprimanded for entering information into systems wrong because, you know, numbers bounce around on screens for me as a dyslexic person. I've been forced to disclose my dyslexia or be fired. I've had to use legal teams to help me construct documents to make sure that, you know, I was protected and things like that, because it's still new language. It's still a new, I don't know, these are all new terms. Employers, managers, unless they really care, right? They probably don't even know what half of the stuff means in the first place. And so even with my clients, I've had, some of my clients have become my clients because they're about to be fired and they don't know how to protect themselves in the workplace. So I think what employers can do is create safe spaces for people with differences to allow them to feel like this is a space that they are trusted, they are seen and they are heard. And then from there, you could figure out what additional needs or support somebody requires, because in some instance, again, we are all different. I may be dyslexic, somebody's dyspraxic, somebody's autistic. they're not one size fits all. We cannot all wear the same trainers, you know what I mean? So I think employers need to listen and create safe spaces first. I think there has been an effort, right? There's a load of networks. Every organization, that's London for you. Every organization has a network, a disability network, a this network, a that network, but rarely do they ever have buy-in from like SLT. And so very little happens. And then people go again feeling unseen, unheard, unsafe, and the cycle just consistently continues. So for me, it's foundational. It's to start with a safe space.
Well, you've just described some quite dreadful experiences there, and ones that would, if it was me, would have affected me quite badly, and I would have felt quite excluded within the workplace. Yeah. And that leads me on to introducing Terry Lees, who's practice manager of the Centre for Inclusive Leadership. Hi, Terry.
Yeah, good morning, Simon. Morning, Remi.
Morning. And so you've heard Remi, just share those stories. What do you think? Firstly, what's your response, and what do you think employers need to do to help neurodiversity in the workplace?
Well, I think Remi's very articulate explanation of her lived experience demonstrates that all of us need to do far more because this is commonplace, particularly in a time when we are so far apart from each other. We are living in what best described as a hybrid world, but actually we're in a virtual world where most of us, the workplace is being completely redefined. The workplace is our home place, our workplace is not ordinary. So I think that's a good place to start. I think what we would say, so from the Centre for Inclusive Leadership, our definition is to say that diversity is difference and inclusion is about all of us. And that's really important. Diversity is not inclusion. And that goes to your point, Remi, about how we can remove labels, which we know creates stigma for people. It gives a perception of whether people are good, bad, or indifferent, which frankly are just unhelpful. All of us are different because we're all diverse. If there are 8 billion people on the planet, then by proxy, there are 8 billion different types of diversity. And if we use inclusion to the best of our ability, then we can seek value through the diversity that we all bring. And if we just hold on to that, then surely at its heart or at its root, all of us, whether that's organisations, whether that's from a team perspective, whether that's individuals as leaders or simply as humans, we could all do more to make workplaces more inviting, more inclusive for all of us. That's probably a good place to start.
Okay, thanks, Terry. This is a question for both of you then. Maybe we make this a bit more of a conversation around employers have this challenge right now about being more inclusive to neurodiversity. What practical steps can an employer is really facing into something which is quite new and probably all the policies haven't caught up yet? What are the things that actually an employee can do today to start making a difference?
You want to go, Terry?
Yeah, okay. I'll start. I was thinking about how we treat people, and I think you're right, Simon. There is an element of this which is, of course, protective, legal, compliant. That's about policy. That's about process, and that's making sure that we're doing the right thing. I think for me, it goes way beyond that. I think it is making sure that, and let's think of it like this: if the gold standard is I'm going to treat you how I feel I deserve to be treated, then surely the platinum standard is I'm going to treat you how you deserve to be treated. And each of us have a very different, there's that word again, way of how we'd like to be treated, of what is important to us. And the best route that we find through that is great conversation. It's unlocking those barriers to understand the three of us on this call, each of us will have a different way of, if we go to that neurodiversity piece, we each of us have a different way of thinking. We each of us have a different way of working through information and understanding what good looks like. What good looks like to me is going to be different to what it is to Remi, is different to you, Simon. And at the heart of that is a great conversation, and is really understanding if you're in the practical bit is, if you're in my team, Simon or Remi, is get to know you really well and understanding actually what's important to you. That's, I think, at the heart of it, that conversation's a good starting point.
Yeah, and for me, there's a few things. So what does that even mean? You know, employers are becoming more inclusive or more, you know, what does that mean? What does that mean for company culture? You're also inviting maybe a different type of person you've never employed before into this new space. How are the people that are currently in the space going to react to, you know, the people entering the space, and what does that look like as well? Because that's, you know, when you miss some of these things, it leads to bullying, it leads to misinterpretations and things like that. So that's the first thing. The other part for me was around recruitment. This has to start earlier. It cannot start at the point where, you know, the person who has a difference has gone through all this additional trouble, not for everyone, but from my lived experience, right? Applications aren't easy for me. I can articulate myself perfectly fine if we're just talking, right? But sitting down and writing any application and tricky questions and things like that, that isn't a strength for me. And so I already show up with a weakness before I've even got through the doors, right, to even be considered for employment. So it has to start at the recruitment process for me. What are the changes that you've created for people who are applying that have these differences, right? So what are the, how accessible is this role in the first place, right? Those kind of things. And then the other part was policy must really reflect the melting pot of diversity across the board. We cannot shout about, yes, you know, we're hiring all neurodivergent people over here, but actually, what does that really mean when we're talking about D&I, and how is it, like, again, how does it reflect in the workplace, and what are the true considerations that are implemented or, you know, discussed in the workplace about how people with differences are absorbed into teams and managed and leadership, like all of the things, because without any of these things discussed, policy, recruitment, and what it really means to hire people with differences, I think we're just, you know, this is going to be another thing that's a trend and it will disappear again. We'll go back to square one.
Just a quick interruption to this Neurocast to ask for your help. We're currently running an assessment into attitudes towards neurodiversity in the workplace. We'd like everyone to take part. It should only take a few minutes, and the link's below. Thank you very much.
Well, you raise a really important point, I think, there, that a lot of employers probably not even aware of they're doing, and that is around some of the discriminative behaviours that are completely unintentional, but are there anyway, that you talk about the application form. Instantly there's a barrier put in place for visually impaired, visually stressed, dyslexic people, you know, and but that's pretty much what everybody does, right? They create an application form, whether it's online or on paper, whatever. But I just wanted to ask you about that. It's often seen as a management issue around diversity and inclusion in general. But what about the inclusivity of neurodivergent people amongst colleagues, amongst the workers themselves? What's been your experience around your lived experience with the people in the organisation?
For me,
yeah.
So it depends, right? It depends on the organisation. This isn't true for all the places that I've worked, but for the last two organisations that I've worked with, if you do not keep up, you look like a slacker. If you are, you know, I am not somebody who receives information verbally, you know, like in a lecture theatre where the lecturer is consistently talking at you. That's not the best way for me to receive information. I need to take notes, I need to digest my notes, and I need them printed out on paper. And then I need to go through them line by line. That takes a lot of time, right? And so I've said it multiple times. I sent emails about it because a manager when I was in a professional environment, and it's just like they just forget. I do not digest information well if it's spoken at me. Please send me an email so that I can print it off, or please do not bombard my inbox with multiple emails about the same thing. Please condense it so I can. It's just, you're constantly telling people how best you work, and unless they care enough, unless somebody from the top is saying, listen, this is how this person works, do not pressure them in this way, it just falls on deaf ears. And sometimes it's the managers that are complicit, right? Sometimes it's the person who is my manager who doesn't care, and so actually why would anybody else in the team change or do things in a different way? I've been under immense pressure to deliver, to provide information on the spot, even though we've had all the Myers-Briggs training you could think of, which says this person is an introvert or this person operates just like this. It just all falls on deaf ears, and it's really unfortunate, because I do worry, especially like for my clients and stuff who are literally in my DMs crying sometimes. I'm about to be fired. I did this wrong because they didn't understand that I work like this, or I haven't disclosed because I'm afraid of this, and it's all connected to your livelihood. And can you imagine that pressure every day of worrying if you're going to be fired because you haven't been able to keep up with what they deem as the norm in that space? So my experience has been quite turbulent, I'll say that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing that story. What about you, Terry?
Yeah, can I come in? And again, that was fascinating, Remi. I think that what that says to me is, again, we have the one thing that we've all got in common, particularly right now, is we're all time poor.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of instinct, you might say bad practice, negligent at worst, and certainly discriminatory, is without that time, people are setting the conditions in their own eyes and in my own shadow. So I'm setting the conditions for people to work based on what I like and what I need. And actually, listening to you, Remi, what that's not taking account of is the conditions and the environment for Remi to succeed, for Simon to succeed. And that's really important. And because that takes time, to understand, okay, so what is it that's going to be, and the questions I would always be referring to would be, put quite simply, what are the conditions for you to be at your best?
Right.
What are the conditions when potentially you are at your worst?
Yeah.
So I can try and avoid those. And actually, when does it get more serious for you? Yeah. So you started talking then, Remi, about information overload and how that can lead to you feeling stressed, anxious, and actually at its worst, that leads people feeling excluded. Yeah. And I think for us, when we think about exclusion, we very commonly go to thinking that's about protected characteristics, that people feel excluded because of gender, because of race, because of sexual orientation, because of social mobility. And of course, all of those things are absolutely true. But we know, as we started this conversation, we're learning far more about the human brain. We're learning far more about neurodiversity. There are far more reasons why people can feel excluded. Yeah. And at the heart of what we can try and do is create that psychological safety within organizations to make people feel like they can belong and set the conditions for all of us.
I think the questions are fantastic. And I think that that's just a common ground, just from like a human to human, like interaction. Yeah. It can be that simple. It can be as simple as asking, how best can you, like, what do I need to provide you with for you to show up, and be the most productive and the best possible, employee that you can be. It can be as simple as that. And you would be surprised how often that's missed. And then there's the judgment, right? Everybody's looking at you. You're a new person. You're trying to figure it out, but actually you have additional needs. And so I've resulted in making sure that everybody knows I'm dyslexic from the jump. I put it in, if I applied for roles, it was in my application forms and it's on my signature. And I don't even have the autonomy to be private, because if I do, it's probably to my detriment, right? I'm probably not going to be considered for a role that I'm more than qualified to do and have the expertise in and things of that nature. So I think the questions is a great space to start.
Just a quick reminder that if you can help us out by taking the assessment, which just takes a few minutes of your time, that'd be really helpful.
Just a question that's formed whilst you were talking there, Remi, around the nature of dyslexia and what it means to you as an individual. That you know, any other kind of diversity, we wouldn't need to disclose on our email or whatever. You know, if you know, diversity from a race perspective, you wouldn't need to put that I am black or I am white on you. And so why is it that you have to do it for dyslexia? Is it because it is considered a disability, and therefore you have to do that, or is it, you know, what is it then?
So from my perspective, it's if there's spelling errors, right? Depending on who your manager is, I'm not sure if you've had a stickler before for like grammar, and so imagine if you're dyslexic, right? And so everyone's nodding. Imagine if you're dyslexic and you've used grammar wrong, or you've spelt something wrong. You can only imagine the judgment, especially if you've entered the space for the first time and things of that nature. Tech has only really become a thing in the last, let's say, maybe 8 years, right? Especially for somebody who has a disability like dyslexia. It's moving, you know, at quite a rapid pace now. But when I was in university, I was handwriting, and, you know, I had spell check. That was as far as it went. And if you didn't use grammar properly, oh well, you know, spell check may or may not have picked it up. And so I don't think I have a choice. I really don't think I have a choice. And I think it's a level of protection as well for me from the gate. And also, it's funny enough, I've had other colleagues in the past say, oh my God, I'm dyslexic too. I saw it in your signature. Can we have a chat? So I think it's almost like a lighthouse for other dyslexics or others who have differences in organizations as well. And I don't mind, because I've had such an experience with having dyslexia. Like if somebody needs to lean on me for a few moments just to vent because they're having such a turbulent time, I'm fine with that too. But it is from a space of protection. And I didn't know it was a lighthouse effect in a way, but that's what it's kind of become to others who notice that, you know, I've got that in a signature or something.
That lighthouse effect is so important, Remi. I mean, you're talking about a really strong human characteristic, which is that piece around vulnerability, and people connect with people under those circumstances, when, particularly in leaders, when leaders are able to say, here's my lived experience. This is what happens to me every day. This is some of the reasons why potentially I'm different to you. And I think differently, and I look differently, and I act differently. I think to be able to share that is just such a great trait, and it really embraces. It allows other people to say, to your point, oh well, actually, do you know what? I experienced that as well, or that, and you know, it's really interesting. We find there's certainly a number of occasions over the last 12 months where we've worked with clients who have got people who are more senior in their leadership roles, who are being diagnosed with things that are starting to help explain to them some of the reasons why they've experienced what they've experienced, and that's extraordinary in itself.
Yeah. There's a level of masking, I think, that, you know, has so much depth to it as well, because people have had no choice. A lot of people have had no choice but to mask. And I'm not sure if we're going to touch on this, Simon, but I think that this is the reason why I became a coach, because people just kept coming. As the more honest I became around my experiences being dyslexic, you know, my entrepreneurial journey as well, people just kept coming and asking questions and, you know, wanted to know how they could engage with me further and stuff. So I used to think I was a natural entrepreneur, but what I've realized is that it's probably a lot more to do with survival, because a lot of the professional environments that I've experienced just haven't worked for me. They haven't worked for me as a dyslexic Black woman, you know.
And what you've really described there is leadership in its truest sense. The traditional model of the leader particularly the middle class white male leader, is around being strong and not weak in any way and not showing vulnerabilities. And what you described there is showing your vulnerabilities, and people have begun to follow you passionately.
Yeah.
And so I think that's it's a model for leadership anyway, but certainly model for leaders who want to be much more inclusive in their organizations because they've realized the impact of exclusion and the benefits of inclusive leadership.
Yeah, I think we would say that leadership is inclusive leadership, that they are one of the same thing, and it's creating that psychological safety for all of us to so that we can belong. We feel that we have a connection with something. There's a shared future, and more than ever, particularly over what the pandemic's done to us is made us understand that we're connected to purpose more than we ever have been. I think in an inclusive environment, inclusive leaders create the conditions for people to be authentic and be me. I'll be me if you can be you.
Yeah.
That allows us all to, all of us, and this is the important bit, it's not just organisation setting the conditions, we meet it too, because we manage our own inclusion. We've got the ability to develop and grow.
Yeah.
We can make a meaningful contribution with our skill set. Yeah. And it was fascinating, Remi, at the start that you talked about, people picking you up and colleagues like you because of your weaknesses. Yeah. And actually it's about accentuating your strengths, right, and really thinking about the traits and the talents that you bring. And then finally, I think for us, it's about, do I have a voice, and can I use that voice with effect? So if I'm going to use my voice, are people going to listen to me? Because the leadership that's in place in the organisation are really going to say, absolutely, I hear you. And with those in place, I think inclusion is a great tool for us all to make sure that we all feel like we can belong in organisations for the future in what has been a huge time of transition for us. But here's the key: it's transition, but change is constant. It's here to stay.
I think the inclusive leadership thing is right? But it's so important because there aren't enough of us with differences in those positions, and I'm constantly seeing that there is not much space either for somebody with a lot of differences in those spaces as well. So we have to keep having these conversations. We have to keep talking about, even if it hurts, even if it really peels back some of the wounds, right? Peels the skin back from some of the wounds, because if we don't, we just send out these messages, these signals to say, there is no space here for you. There is no space here for you. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was going to put a post on LinkedIn, but it was more around race, but it works here too, around when you only allow one in, the amount of pressure that person has to show up and deliver. Otherwise, they may never be considered again in that space. It's the same. It works here with these differences as well. It works with race, it works with gender, it works across the board. But imagine the amount of pressure that person has to now face to show up and deliver properly. And if not, nobody else, who's dyslexic or ADHD will ever be allowed in this space again. And that's why inclusive leadership for me is so important. What does that look like? What conversations are we having? Are people feeling safe, seen and heard in their organizations? And those are the things that we need to constantly keep pricking at.
Completely.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully, like everyone else watching, we've learned something, and it's been educational, which we set out to do. And I just wanted to thank both of you for joining me this morning, and thanks again for sharing your honest views and disclosing quite uncomfortable things, Remi. So thank you ever so much. And so I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Remi. Thank you, Simon.